Hello, and welcome to the AML YouTube channel. We're here today with Shannon Hale, who is the recipient of the 2024 Smith-Pettit Foundation Award for Outstanding Contribution to Mormon Letters, which is the Association of Mormon Letters' highest lifetime achievement award. Speaking as an entirely biased reader and fan, I can't imagine anyone deserving this more than Shannon.
Oh, wow.
Agreed. Her books from Newbery Honor recipient Princess Academy to the delightful Austen Land that has turned into a fabulous film, and series like her books of Bayern and Princess in Black have delighted readers for years. Happened to be one of the first books that I ever actually owned myself. Princess Academy was my first favorite book.
Wow.
And I truly cannot wait to talk to her about all of them. But before we dive in, just so you get to know who you're actually listening to today. Hi, I'm Emma Tueller. I'm a PhD candidate studying religion and children's literature at the University of Cambridge. And I'm here with Katie. Katie, do you want to introduce yourself briefly as well?
Yes, I'd love to. Hello, I'm Katie Irion. I'm a current adjunct professor at Brigham Young University, where I teach university writing 150, and then every couple semesters I get to teach young adult literature, which is like a dream come true. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Yay, and I'm Shannon Hale, and I am a native and local Utahn, and I'm a writer, and I have published over 40 books for all ages, from preschoolers up to adults, in lots of different genres over the past 20 plus years.
So great.
I love that.
Yes.
So we have a list of questions to ask you that we
Great.
will kind of stick to, but mostly we'd just love to hear your thoughts about your career, what religion has meant in that, and how you think of yourself as a writer.
Great.
So I think as a very first question, would you mind telling us a little bit about your writing process and what it feels like for you to write and how you think about storytelling?
Sure. I mean, I think that depending on when you ask me that question in my life, it will have been different.
I wondered that.
So I started writing when I was 10. I am now 50. And so over the past 40 years, there's been many changes and variations depending on environment and everything else. When I was a kid, I was full of stories and ideas, and I would make up little plays and act out, I would make up games, pretend games, like really intricate kind of stories for my friends to play when they were willing, or my little brother and sister. And then when I started writing in fourth grade, because I had a teacher started us writing books and poetry, I was like, oh, this is where all this stuff in my head can go. So I think I was always a storyteller, and I needed an outlet for it. I did a lot of theater, so that was another outlet. But when I was 19, I was like, that's two impossible dreams, like an actress and a writer. And I did this real like soul searching thing. What can I not live without? And it was writing.
Oh.
So at that point, I kind of gave up on theater, except for just fun, and began just to focus on my writing. So when I was younger, I would get ideas and I'd be spontaneous, and I'd write something down, and I'd feel bad about myself that I didn't write for months, and I could never started many books and I never finished. Go on through, college and grad school until I became more disciplined. I would give myself writing goals every day. I would have to write 1,000 words today. It couldn't be page count.
Yeah.
Because you could cheat that. It would have to be word count. You have big font or whatever. So I write a lot of dialogue. So there's a lot of white space.
Yes.
So I learned to do word count, and and it could be anywhere from 500 words that day to 2,500. That's a rare day, but usually about 1,000 to 1,500 words a day I could write. When I'm doing a first draft and then revising, I would give myself different kinds of goals, like go through 20 pages, redo this scene, whatever, I really had to, I'm not that kind of a person in all ways, but I had to I wanted to write so badly that I had to create infrastructure for myself to make myself do it. So to the point where today, I wrote, most of my writing career has been with children without any help. So it really was kind of guerrilla warfare. And in some ways, I feel like that was positive, because I learned not to be fussy. And if I have 15 minutes when someone's not talking to me, then I can write. It doesn't matter. I can tune out background noise as long as it's not someone who needs my attention.
Yes.
And so today my process would be, whenever I sit down, I get a thrill, like, to write now.
That's so great.
Even when it's hard, it's good. And I open up my writing journal and I write what I'm working on today. And sometimes it's multiple things, because I juggle so many projects now. And when you make a career out of it, the business side of it can really take your writing time. So when it's actually like, oh, today, I just get to spend 3 or 5 or 7 or how many hours just focused on these characters and the words. And that's really cool.
I love that.
I do too. As a follow-up question, have you found that are you like a plotter? Are you like an outliner? How does that work for you? And has it changed over the years?
Yeah, I'm really flexible. I'm really kind of whatever the project needs.
Really?
But I have found the biggest change to my writing over the years that I think has been an improvement for me has been more outlining.
Mhm.
Because I've discovered that I'm a real reviser and I revise a lot. And when I write a novel that just kind of pours out of me and then it's just junk, revising 90,000 words,
Oh, my word.
15 to 30 times takes so much time.
Yeah.
So I've been able to be as prolific as I am because I do so much of that revising in outline form.
Mhm.
If I have a 3 to 10,000 word outline, I can see story problems
Mhm.
in a smaller form and revise it in that form
Yeah.
before I start to write. And the key has been for me finding the joy in the outline. I avoid it in the past because it's like not the fun part.
Yeah.
So I have to find the joy in it, and I think that I have. And so now I do outline. It doesn't mean that if you look at my outlines and final draft,
Yeah.
it's never going to line up.
Oh,
completely.
really?
You always discover things in the process, and then of course get lots of notes from editors and readers, and you make other revisions. And so it is a long process, but I end up doing less revision, I think, than I used to in novel form because I do outlines.
That is so cool. That is just really great to hear as a teacher of writing that you
Yes.
revise, you have to revise all the time.
I think there's no way I could be a writer without revising. You never learn how to write a novel, and every single time I fool myself. I'm like, I write a beautiful outline. I've spent years thinking about this story, and I'm like, this time I'm gonna get it right. I'm gonna get it right out of the gate. I think I have to fool myself in order to keep doing it. But my current 2 novels that I've been working on the past few years, keep getting pulled off and other stuff whenever I go back to them. I mean, one of them is like draft 9
Oh,
in
that's
novel
so
form, not just
cool.
outline. I did lots of outlining, and then I've done like 9 drafts to the point where it's like my book of Theseus is what I call it, because there's not a single sentence from first draft that still has
Wow.
survived. And yet somehow it's still this, is it the same?
Wow. Yeah.
Every sentence is different. I think it is, and it's not done. And my agent's like, no, I'm not, I won't even take it out right now because it's not ready yet. I'm like, I worked so hard on
Yes.
this. I talk about
Oh.
Andy Ellis, who's a wonderful professor
Yeah.
of literature and writer at BYU. And she read it for me.
Yeah.
And she had 500 notes on it. Like
Oh,
I could see,
my-
because she did it, in the notes comments column
Yeah.
on the document. And I took them all seriously, and I totally understood where she was coming from. I did that robust revision, and I got another reader, and I wrote it, and I got another reader, and I revised it again, and still my agent's like, nope.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's persistence.
That's persistence.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite part of the writing process?
Yeah.
Like something that you always look forward to?
Completing it. I would say, no, I don't have one favorite part. It really depends on how it's going.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you're in the weeds and I'm
Mhm.
like, I don't know, you just write your way out of the weeds, you just work, but I could spend weeks fiddling around with a story, knowing that it's not working and you just have to try stuff out and see, does that work now? No, that didn't work. Does that change anything? No, that didn't work. And then in the middle of it, you make one change, or you notice one sentence you hadn't noticed before that gives you
Mhm.
information that you hadn't known was there, and you're like, oh,
Uh.
it's there's some clarity, and like this will fix this subplot and actually strengthen it and make it stronger. So those moments, you never know when they're going to come. You have
Yeah.
to put in the work to get those moments, but those are the best.
Oh, I love that.
I do too. I had a question, but which of your books have been this process, which is work? I love that you keep saying that. Which has been the easiest to from idea to conception to completion?
I have a couple of books that I kind of got in a way. I've heard other writers say this, and I get it now. It's like it existed and you're channeling it.
Uh-huh.
I still did multiple revisions, but Book of 1,000 Days, I don't feel like I really wrote, even though I did do, at least 12 revisions of it. And the Squirrel Girl books that I did for Marvel that I wrote with my husband.
Yeah.
I love comedy.
Mhm.
And that character was just a
Yeah.
blast to write. So, and writing to the idea,
She's
someone
delightful.
she's so
Yeah.
optimistic.
Yeah.
And it was such a dark time in many ways
Yeah.
while we were writing those books. That Dean and I were both like, this is better than therapy. Just thinking with the point of view of that really fun character.
That's really great.
Was there a book that was the hardest to
Yeah.
write?
Yeah, and you never know why, like, why was it hard? I can't tell you, but, there are multiple. Forest Born was really hard. My first draft to last, it's not even the same book. It took me a long time to figure her out. And there was something in there that I knew there was something that it needed, and that book didn't sell super well, but I meet people all the time who will say, that's my favorite book of all time, and I'm like,
I love that book.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that book.
it makes me so happy because I worked so hard on it. And the whole time I'm thinking, there's somebody that needs this. It almost felt like a metaphysical, like supernatural experience in some ways. I mean that very lightly. But you just like, why do you keep, as an artist, why do you keep working on something that you don't know if it's going to work out?
Yeah.
And it's so hard, and maybe no one will care. But you have this kind of feeling like, I think somebody needs it.
Oh.
I've had other books that were hard and I abandoned because I didn't feel that. And I did with that book.
Well, it worked.
Yeah.
It worked, yes, I
It
agree.
worked brilliantly.
I agree. Speaking back to your childhood little, what was it like growing up in your household? Was your family a bunch of readers? Were your parents readers? What were your favorite books? When did like stories capture you when you were younger?
Yes. Well, I was a real oddball. So we had books in our house, but not a lot. Most of my reading was because of my school library.
Oh, really?
And we had church books, and my dad was a very devout reader of scriptures and other church books. But none of my mom or my siblings, they were not really big readers. I remember in elementary school saying how much I loved to read, and my older sister saying, yeah, I used to too, but you grow out of it. And I was like, never. So my mom also bought a set of encyclopedias from a traveling salesman.
Yes.
And when I didn't have anything else to read, I would just go and read that. So there was something weird about me. Nobody in the family read those books except for me. And I was always, that's one memory all my family has of me is like being in there reading. I would just open it up and read stuff. I just had a brain that wanted to absorb information as well. So books that I loved, I think my first book I remember being my favorite book was Trumpet of the Swan by E.B. White.
Yeah.
And then I really loved fantasy starting in 4th grade, like the Narnia books. I read Lloyd Alexander, I loved Joan Aiken. She was so funny. And Robin McKinley, Patricia McKillop, and McCaffrey were all big writers for me.
Yeah.
And I loved the fantasy Far, Far Away. I mean, my mind is going off to distant places. There's another book that was called The Lottery Rose, a super depressing book about a kid who was abused. I reread that so many times. I think there's something in a kid that like yearns for validation of like when you're feeling awful. And like, I was that kid, you know, and I really was not that kid, but I think I felt that way. I remember when I first started like doing school visits after getting published, I would ask kids what their favorite books were. And there was this time where every school I went to, kids would say, A Child Called It, which is a memoir of horrific abuse. And I was like, that's too much for these elementary school children. But at the same time, kids need that honesty of like how hard life is. And even though they haven't gone through what that person went through by a long shot, they have these feelings and they need to see that those feelings are real and they get validated by reading it. And a couple of my books, people have said now too, these are too much, these are too hard for kids. And the adults, my memoirs, my adults don't like to read them, and the kids, they eat them up. Like they're like, what a relief. They're not hard, they don't feel heavy to them, they feel like a relief.
Which of your books have you heard that about?
Real Friends, Best Friends, and Friends Forever. So I have 3 graphic novels that are memoirs of growing up. Bullying, trouble with kids, trouble with older sister, and then just growing up with an undiagnosed anxiety disorder and OCD.
Those books, they've been a lifeline for my little 10-year-old daughter. In fact, last night we were chatting, I said, tomorrow, I was looking at her bookshelf. I said, tomorrow I'm going to talk to the author of this book, Hannah. Mom, that's my favorite book. She has a lot of anxiety, school, social, and the little group of girls that were 10 years old in our neighborhood started a book club. and that was the first book they read.
Oh.
Was your first one, and it spoke to all of them in such a different way. So this is so surprising to me that you get some backlash about it, because it's
For every reason. There's also
Wow.
religion in it.
right.
And so I get a lot of pushback about that from every side.
Mhm.
So there are people who are not religious that feel like it's inappropriate
Huh.
to mention religion. I don't think it's heavy-handed. I think there's like 3 pages in the entire book that show little me praying
Yeah.
and or imagining Jesus as this kind of imaginary friend, childhood friend. And anytime you put big J in a book, it's just like,
Mm.
but like some people are like, absolutely not. There's no context when it's okay
Mhm.
to put Jesus in a book that's not specifically a Christian book for Christian readers.
Mhm.
And then on the other side, there are people who are Christian that feel like this is not my Jesus, this is not my version of
Oh.
Jesus. Because actually, I think those parts are funny.
Oh, I love them.
I know, and it's not mocking Jesus,
No.
but it is kind of like this idea. There's this one scene where little Shannon, there's a lot of daydreams, I call her little Shannon. There's a lot of
Oh.
daydream sequences where she's imagining like she may die and her friends won't even care. And she's sitting down like this, just kind of sad as her friends ran away saying, who cared? We don't even care like Shannon anyway. And she's sitting like this, and Jesus is sitting next to her. And he says, well, I like you. And she says, thanks, Jesus. Because it's like, it's supposed to be enough, but
Yeah.
it didn't feel like enough, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And I
yeah.
think it's really kind of sweet and funny, but the most important part of it to me is that it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It felt true that that's how I felt then. But for some people, Jesus is so sacred that you can't portray him in any way. We've actually had people, it had been banned in some places because the little girl speaks directly to Jesus
Yeah.
without
Mhm.
going through an intermediary.
Oh,
And in
interesting.
some religions, that's completely inappropriate.
Mhm.
So we knew when I was writing it, that if you mention religion in any way, there will be pushback and you will lose readership. But I did it anyway, in part just because religion was interwoven
Yeah.
in the fabric of my whole life. I couldn't write about my childhood without talking about, it wasn't separated
Yeah.
from any other aspect of my life. It was just the reality, it was the oxygen in the air.
Mhm.
And also, honestly, I didn't think anybody would read it.
Oh, really?
I didn't.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, the whole time I'm writing it, I'm
Mhm.
thinking, shut up, Shannon, no one cares. If someone was mean to you in 4th grade, like who's gonna care and who's gonna read about it? And I kept clinging to this one thing that another graphic novelist who did memoir told me, that the more specific you make your story, the more universal it becomes. So I was like, I'm just gonna be totally honest how I felt,
Mhm.
because again, I felt like somebody out there
Yeah,
needs this. And I had an actual example of it in my own home. I thought my daughter
Yeah.
specifically, this is the only kind of book that she reads right now. And she's struggling, and I feel like I have something to say, but it's gonna be different. She can read a graphic novel than if she hears it from her mom.
yeah.
So but I really didn't think it would have far reach. It might just have, some people here and there might like it. And then it came out on a Tuesday. And by Friday, because I started on book tour, by Friday I was meeting kids who had read it 25 times already.
Oh,
I mean, their book was already
I
falling
bet.
apart. And I've never had that experience before.
Mhm.
So I knew it was because it's validating,
yes,
Mhm.
but in not in a preachy way, because all I did was tell the truth
yes.
about how I felt. But that's such a relief
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
kids to hear, okay, I'm
Mhm.
not the only one that felt that way. Maybe I'm not broken. Maybe I'm not wrong. And graphic novels are so accessible.
Yes,
So they just kind of reach people wherever they are, which I love. I've been a proponent of them
yeah,
from early days, where I used to have to tell people what graphic novels when my first one came out.
yeah.
Because I would get, when I announced I was doing one, I get these emails. I am shocked, Shannon Hale. I announced that I was doing a graphic novel, and the same blog post, I used to have a blog, that was the thing, that I was doing an adult novel, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And my first graphic novel was Rapunzel's Revenge, and this was early so this
Yeah.
was probably like, maybe like 2005 or 6 or something. And I got so many emails. I used to be able to trust you. And now I hear that you're doing a graphic novel and an adult book, and I was like, what is going on? Oh, they think graphic meaning like extreme violence or
Yeah,
sex, and they
yeah.
adult book like adult video store.
Yeah.
And I went, no, like, adult as in for adults about the main character is
Yes.
grown up.
I really appreciate on your website, you have a link to show research on how graphic novels are
Right.
really actually beneficial for
Yes.
young readers. I send Because I get a lot of students here at BYU that I have 2 graphic novels that we read, and I have some that bristle, like,
Mm.
this isn't real literature,
Yeah.
this isn't. And I send them your link, because I'm like, no, just give it a hot minute. But I was curious, what was the decision between making the Real Friends trilogy a graphic novel instead of a novel?
It was absolutely my daughter.
Oh, was it?
So, yeah. So I had done 2 graphic novels in the 2000s with my
Yeah.
husband, and then I hadn't done any for a while. And then my daughter, my son just inhaled books
Mhm.
from birth and was reading chapter books before kindergarten. And my daughter was what they would have called a reluctant
Mhm.
reader.
Mhm.
And at a certain point, I just stopped with the phonics and I just read to her for fun. So I was like, she's gonna get turned off.
Mhm.
And I just kept reading to her for fun. I would read her novels, I'd read her picture books, I just read. And then, I ignored, I love the teachers, but also I could tell she was not gonna become a reader. And I hate books if I pushed it. And eventually I just started bringing graphic novels home.
Yeah.
And I read the first couple pages and she would want to know what happened.
Yeah.
And she taught herself to read
Oh,
with graphic novels.
that's great.
So I knew this was an entry point for her, and I was like, and then Smile
Yeah.
by Rena Telgemeier and El Defo by CC Bone, my
Yes.
favorite graphic novel memoirs. I just like, there's something to saying, most of what I've been doing was, I hadn't done any nonfiction. I've been doing Long We Go Far Away kind of books, but there's something about saying, this is real. And at the time, I was just coming off of a series called Ever After High,
Yeah.
which was a tiny blip, but when it blipped, it was
Yes,
huge.
yes.
So it sold millions of copies
Yeah.
in a short period of time, and it was a Mattel invented the world, asked me to write the books.
Yeah.
And then they had a toy line and a TV shows and movies and stuff. And so I was pretty well known by a certain segment of population. And I thought, I could, if I tell this story and if I tell them how hard that I had hard times like they're having right now, there's a built-in happy ending because they know who I am and they trust that I'm going to come out right in the end.
Yeah.
So I felt like they could go through these hard times with me in the book because they know already it's going to be okay.
That's really sweet.
And then by the time it came out, no one even knew ever tried anywhere. But that kind of gave myself permission to do what might have been too hard otherwise.
Yeah. Can I ask one more question about the graphic novel?
Please do.
What's the experience like getting an illustrator? Because her illustrations fit your story just so well. And in fact, I loved even the ones about Lagoon. Growing up in Utah, it was just so fun to see these like landmarks a part of this book, that were a part of my life. But who put you together? Did you choose her? What's that process like?
So Leywin Pham,
Yeah.
we had met years, like 20 years ago, but she was mostly did picture books and I was doing novels. So we liked each other's stuff, but we never thought we would work together. And then when I started Princess in Black, which I co-wrote with my husband, when we sold it to Candlewick. And they said, we think the best illustrator for this. So usually publishers put together the illustrator.
Oh, okay.
Almost all the time. The writer, if it's not a writer illustrator, then the writer writes and sells the manuscript, and then they choose what illustrator to put with it. And they said, we think the best person would be Leywin Pham. And I was like, clearly, but she's way too busy. We'll never get her. And turned out she wanted to work with me so much that she said yes. And so we've got the book 11, the Princess Black series coming up. So we worked together on that. But that's a very different kind of thing. That's me and my husband writing a script, revising it, and usually done like a year before she even starts her stuff. And then there's no art notes. The only thing we write in those books is what you see on the page. And then she takes it and she gets to do whatever she wants with it. She's brilliant. She runs with it, makes it fun. And we do our stuff very separately. So with a graphic novel, it's more like writing a screenplay. So you're writing panel by panel, and but I think it's harder than a screenplay because I've done screenplays too, and you know that there's going to be sound and motion and all the other things. This is just the blueprint. The graphic novel, you really, it's hard. Graphic novels are hard to write. Anyway, write page 1, panel 1, you describe everything that's happening, and then you write any dialogue or anything that might be in it. So I'd written up this graphic novel for Real Friends, and I'd worked on it for a while, and nobody had seen it. And since Wynn was a friend, I just said, hey, I would love just your illustrator's eyes. Like I was feeling really, I was very vulnerable. It's the most vulnerable I've ever been writing that. And also really unsure because it's my own story that it was even worth a story,
Yeah.
and let alone like just thinking about it from the point of view of a visual medium. So I asked her if she would look at it as a friend and just give me any feedback. She read it almost immediately and she said she had no feedback, but she would like to illustrate it.
Oh.
And she said, I'd like to throw my hat in the ring if that's okay. As if I wouldn't jump at the chance.
Right,
But at the
right.
time she wasn't doing graphic novels, so I had not even thought of her.
Yeah.
And graphic novels are a huge endeavor for
Yeah.
artists. There's
Mhm.
so much work. So I never would have asked. I truly was not me trying to get on the side door.
Mhm.
I just couldn't believe that she wanted to do it. So when I eventually sold it, I told the editor who happened to have worked with Wynn that Wynn was interested. He's like, really? So that was just serendipitous. And since then, Wynn and I've also done a series of picture books together. So I've published over 40 books, but almost half of them are with her.
Oh,
And
that's a great
we became
partnership.
best friends through the graphic novels. It's just a really intimate process that like we really just became best friends through that.
That's really neat.
That's so
Thank you
cool.
for indulging me. I just always want to know. So cool.
Oh, well, I'm gonna pivot a little bit.
Yeah.
You've written for lots of young adults, for children as young as preschool age, for middle grade readers, and for adults. When you get a story idea, how do you think about audience and age range? Does that come with the story? Is that something you decide?
Yeah, it really, it depends on what the book feels like it's calling for. So when I wrote my first novel, which is The Goose Girl, I was getting MFA in creative writing at an institution that specialized in literary fiction. There was no genre, there was no younger age groups. And I also came out of an era where there wasn't young adult fiction.
Mhm.
Like, technically there was, but there wasn't in my middle school and high school library. I thought that you grew out of,
Mhm.
you went from Newbery books to adult books.
Yeah.
To Hemingway and Steinbeck, what a joy. And that's exactly, you know what a 14-year-old wants to read is Death of a Salesman. That's gonna hook them on reading. It's so relatable.
Totally get it. Yeah.
Like sometimes I'm just like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Teens have a hard enough life. Throw them a bone. Do a
Yes.
comedy occasionally. Anyway, that's my little rant. Just because it's old and the authors are dead doesn't mean it's better.
Yeah.
So I wrote Goose Girl in that context. I didn't know I was writing a young adult book, but at the same time, long story short, I had fallen out of love with reading, and I slowly and hadn't really realized it happened. Once I started high school, and I felt like I wanted to be a writer still, but in order to be a mature adult and someone who cares about literature, these are the books that you read. And so that's all I read, and I stopped reading for fun, and I read like a duty. And I mean, the books were important and wonderful, but you know what? They're all depressing. It's like we have this hierarchy of tragedy is better than comedy, you know, and which is just not true in my experience or realistic. And so I was, you know, a depressed reader, really. And by the time I was in grad school, I realized I was at a bookstore and I had a friend, I was with a friend and he was like running his hands across the spines and taking them out to smell. He's like, don't you love books? And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't. What happened? It was a really shocking discovery. And over like break between my MFA, my brother was not a reader. And so I got out one of my old childhood books that I loved, The Book of Three, and I read him like the first few chapters to get him hooked. And then he read it and he read the whole series. But I was kind of hooked, and I went back and reread it and I was like, oh, I still love this stuff. So when I wrote The Goose Girl, it was on a challenge with another friend of mine in an MFA program who were both secretly like, we loved fantasy, you know, what happened to that? And so I wanted to write something that would have appealed to myself when I was younger, that had the wonder elements, but still had the quality at the sentence level that I was studying and learning to craft. Like I was trying to find the marriage of those two things. So that was my goal. And then eventually it was rejected by everybody, but eventually when I found an agent, she said it's young adult. And I was like, what? I thought that the most I could find was maybe sell it to tour, like for, you know, in adult fantasy. So I made very little changes to it to make it young adult. I mean, I just changed her age, but it was essentially the same story. And that became my entry into it. And I'd already written Anna Burning when it sold. So my third book, Princess Academy, was the first book I wrote thinking of myself as a
Mhm.
writer for young readers.
Mhm.
And so I wrote this book that I thought nobody's gonna like,
Oh, my word.
because I was like, because of the premise and the name, everybody's gonna have a certain expectation of this, and it's not gonna be what they think, and everybody's gonna hate it. And I think if it hadn't been for the Newbery Honor, that's what would have happened.
Oh, my
That it would have
word.
just been, you know, people would have misunderstood it, and, you know, it would have been like thought of as fluffy and pushed to the side by people on one side, and then not found by people the other, because they would read it and be like, there's no actual princesses in this book. This is a misleading title and premise. Anyway, so after that, but I'd already been working on Ocelin, which is my first book for adults. I've published 3 so far, and I have another in the works, but so I was writing Ocelin simultaneously as I was writing
Oh,
Goose Girl.
really?
So I never kind of conceived of myself as only a writer for one age. And I think that opened a door for me just to be like, what does this story want? And really, it's just about the age of the protagonist.
Yeah.
I'm not really necessarily thinking about the reader. I'm thinking about what matters what's interesting to the person of that age, what matters to them most in the stage in their life, et cetera. And then that's naturally just going to probably appeal more to people of that age.
Yeah. Well, if you can indulge us for a second, tell us what it was like to find out about that Newbery Honor.
Oh, it was massive for me.
Yeah,
It's only my 3rd
happened?
book,
Yeah.
and it's been downhill ever since.
No.
I won a major award in 2006, and I haven't won one since.
Well,
So it's not necessarily, which is good. There's not there's not this. I
yeah.
think in some professions, there's like, you start out as the entry level book, and then you move up to the manager till you see, or something like that. I don't know how these things work. Really. Because
Clearly.
I could oddball creative, but that's not how
Yeah.
creative works. Like, there is no hierarchy.
Yeah.
There's just, each book is different, and some of them don't sell very well, but there's a reader out there that changes
Yeah.
their life. And some sell great, like, and then they go away, and
Yeah.
there's no longevity there. And every book is different. But so I am totally being facetious about it. It's all downhill from there. It was just one bright star.
Oh, I bet.
So it was still, I mean, when I told the story, I'm not gonna cry today. I'm checking with myself. I'm like, no, I don't think I will. I'm a very easy crier. But for the first like 10 years afterwards, I would
Yeah.
still cry every time I told the story, because it really did mean a lot to me.
Mhm.
You don't know that your book is up for
Yeah.
consideration. It's just any book that's published for young readers in the US is eligible. It's a very secretive process by a group of like stealth superhero librarians.
Yeah.
And they read all year long, and then you get a call at 4 a.m. The morning before they announce it at the annual conference. And so my phone beeped, buzzed in the middle of the night, and I answered it, and they told me, and immediately I
Oh my
knew
gosh.
this is Barbara Barstow of the Newbery Committee, and I was like, like, you just are out of your body, because I don't know, I don't remember if I used to daydream about that, because it seemed so unachievable. It's not like you can't make a goal to win an award like that.
Yeah.
So I may have daydreamed about it. I can't remember, but I think I had heard other writers who had won describe it. So I kind of knew what was happening. And I just was, my husband next to me, and I'm like sobbing, and he's like, what is happening? Yeah. It's even worse that I got a phone call in the middle of the night and I'm sobbing. Someone's clearly
Yes, for
died.
sure.
And I was crying after I got hung up with them. I was crying so hard that I had started to like throw up.
Oh,
You cry so hard,
Yeah.
you're like dry heaving.
Yeah.
So I went to the bathroom, and I'm like dry heaving. And then I was like, I had to go to the bathroom. So I'm like sitting on the toilet and dry heaving and going to the bathroom. Like, it's so not beautiful at all. And it just kind of hilarious. And I remember looking down at the bathroom floor thinking, I should mop. I had no one to mop, and I should mop. And I had this realization that like, I won a very honor, but that's not me. Anyone's gonna mop my bathroom for me. Like all of these things going on, like what? It felt like everything had changed, but in another way, nothing had really changed.
Yeah.
And then my baby woke up, and he pooped in the middle of the night, and he had the worst diaper rash of his life.
Oh.
And it just like, and then they told me, oh, everybody's gonna make a big deal out of you. You're gonna get so many phone calls, and like nobody called. There was no like local stories about it, or a few months later, somebody did a story. But yeah, like it just went, I got a call from, I love you, Salt Lake Tribune. I got a call a few days later from the Salt Lake Tribune, and the lady, the reporter on it said, so I was told to call you because you won a Newbery thingy. And I said, I did. And she said, what is that exactly?
Oh,
And I was
wow.
like, oh, she didn't even like bother to Google it. And so I explained to her what it was. And as soon as I said children's literature, she said, okay, thank you. And she hung up,
Oh,
and they
my
did not do a
word.
story.
She didn't even interview you. Oh, my
Did not do a
word.
story about it. And I was the first Utah writer in the
Yeah.
100-year history or whatever to win a Newbery honor. And it's like
Nothing.
winning an Oscar or a gold medal in the Olympics or a silver medal maybe at the Olympics. And, but it made me realize like, it's so huge to me.
Mm.
Nobody really cares, you know?
Oh, gosh.
But in some spheres, it mattered everything.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
I was a new writer. And I mean, for one thing, I got on the bestseller list.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I sold a lot of copies and I made money because it was still on hardcover.
yeah.
And so that relieved a lot of financial stress in my little family. And so that was huge. You don't get a monetary prize, but I
Yeah.
did, not all Newbery books sell, but you know what? It looked commercial.
Yeah, yeah.
And it had the shiny sticker, and
Yes.
so that was really good. And then the other thing it gave me is I started remembering there was this story by J.R.R. Tolkien about this little village that they have this once a generation, they have this party and there's a cake. And the chef bakes this star into the cake, and they slice up the cake and they pass around the cake, and all the children get a slice. And somebody gets the slice with the star. And when nobody knows who it's gonna be, but when they eat it, the star
Oh,
comes forward into their forehead, and it's a passport between their world and the land of fairy. And for their whole life, they get to be this person that passes back and forth across the border and gets to have amazing experiences that
Yeah.
other people wouldn't have. And I felt like that, like I felt like all I did was show up to eat cake, but I got to have this kind of
yeah,
little star on me that enabled me to go places and meet people. And suddenly what I had to say mattered more to some people, and kids might, care about me more. It did open up opportunities that would have been there otherwise. So I have real mixed feelings about awards, just because I think in some ways they can be so crushing for people who, they do create opportunities, but it's not a meritocracy. And because it doesn't mean that there's like some final judgment that was definitely the best
Yeah.
book of the year or whatever like that. But when you do get the privilege of them, I honor that I get to have those experiences, and I do feel like a certain amount of responsibility to use that, whatever tiny limited power that is, well, and put some, good back into the world.
Oh, it is such a great book, and it is
Such a
still
great
being
book.
used by like Battle of the Books in schools. And
Oh, yeah.
in fact, my daughter next year will read it for 5th grade Battle of the Books, and I've been like holding off till I'm like, you got 5th grade, I'm gonna do it. But when you did Princess Academy, did you have any intention for it to have sequels?
I mean, every book I write, I think of still to this day. I think of
Oh,
it as
do you?
its own book.
Okay.
And I've never been able to write a trilogy where there's a cliffhanger or something like that. I really love to feel like this is a complete story of its own.
Okay.
But I also always have ideas about what the characters might do.
Okay.
So, yeah, I had ideas. I thought what would happen. But I do think the Newbery Honor made me shy away from doing
Oh, really?
a sequel. Took me 7 years before I was like, maybe I could do a sequel. Because I just thought I would disappoint people.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that sequel. Just
The
as-
sequels were
I
so
know,
fun.
I
So
really
good.
adore those sequels. I was so grateful as a reader to go back into
Yeah.
her world. I loved it so much. Is this something your editor suggests, or is this that when you have the sequels in your?
I mean, I
books?
think when a book does well, editor always wants a sequel, and when it doesn't do well, they never want a sequel.
Okay.
So it's really hard to have a book, like when you have like a series that you want a book a year coming out, you have to be writing the sequel before the first
Yeah.
one comes out, before you know it's gonna
Wow.
be received.
Yeah.
And so it's a real risk to start writing something and spend so much time on something, and then if the book doesn't do well, then they're like, we don't want a sequel. So there's a lot of complicated,
Yeah.
pieces of all of that, and I don't think I'm the best at, I'm not like a good business person. I write what is most compelling to me now,
Yeah.
and I haven't formed probably as good a career and sold as many books and made as much money as some of my contemporaries, especially the men who came up at the same time,
Mhm.
and there's absolutely a gender thing there,
Mhm, mhm.
because women are labeled as, we speak to girls
Mm.
and men speak to
To
everybody.
both, yeah.
So I
Yeah.
immediately, I had half the audience going into it that other people did. I absolutely saw that in every aspect of my career,
Wow. that's
not only in
interesting.
Utah, but everywhere.
Hmm.
But they, like, I'm thinking a couple of my friends who, if you go to a bookstore, all of their books are on one shelf
Mhm.
or maybe
Mhm.
two.
Mhm.
I'm spread out like
Yeah,
10 different places in a bookstore.
yeah,
So that just automatically makes it harder to find.
yeah.
And just because you liked Real Friends doesn't mean you're gonna like Goose Girl, or if you liked
Mhm.
Austenland, you're not gonna necessarily read Princess in Black or whatever.
Mhm.
So you just don't get that kind of cross
Yeah,
pollination as
interesting.
much.
Yeah.
Well, I wanna,
But on the other hand, I get to write a lot of different kinds of books, which is great. And for someone who like gets bored easily, which I hope you're not, because I can't imagine watching this hour Zoom. I'm so sorry. Take a break, get a snack.
well, I wanna talk about men for a second, but more importantly, I wanna talk about princesses. Cause you've written a lot of princesses.
Yeah.
I
that,
have, it's very weird.
That really spoke to me because
Yeah.
when I read Princess Academy for the first time, was in a no princess phase.
Yes,
I had to read Princess Academy at my Aunt Jan's behest because she said that this one would be different. And it was, because this was a princess who did not want to be a princess,
Yeah.
wanted to read books, fought a rat in a cupboard that still sometimes gives me nightmares, just so you know.
oh, wow.
And you've also written a lot of other unconventional princesses, Princess in Black. I'd even say Izzy and Goose Girl
Yeah.
is a princess who doesn't quite do what princesses are supposed to do. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you've thought about gender and defying gender norms, especially around this like very girly idea of a princess
Yeah.
as you've been writing.
Do we have 5 hours?
Absolutely.
We do.
And then I said something I think about and deal with, and I think, well, I mean, there's so much to say. One time I remember I was being interviewed by a national news organization, and they edited this part out of the clip of the interview. But the interviewer was this man who had like a 4-year-old daughter. He started asking me about princesses, and he let me know that he won't allow his daughter to play with princesses, to watch any movies with princesses, that they are negative stereotype.
Mm.
And what was I thinking about having
Oh.
princesses? And I told him, well, I think the root of the hatred against princesses is based in misogyny.
Yeah.
And I was like, princess is girl plus.
Mhm.
And so if there's inherently misogynistic tone to people who are like, princesses are bad for girls. Because there's this idea in our culture, again, we have, Derrida says when we have binary opposites, we put them into hierarchies. So you've got the masculine and the feminine, and we decide masculine's better. So girls that reach towards the masculine are praised. But if they reach toward the feminine, they're demeaning themselves.
Mm.
And of course, boys, if they do things that are feminine, that's like the worst sin. And so by saying that princesses are inherently problematic, when really the definition of a princess is the daughter of royalty,
Mm.
that what comes with it is some kind of status and power. And that's interesting because girls in our culture traditionally have had less power in almost every culture on this earth for the past thousands of years. To have a girl with an interesting piece of power, I would say like witches might be another kind of girl with power. There's lots of different examples of girls and women with power that kind of go against the norm. Princess is inherently a girl with power. What is she going to do with it? I think it's a really interesting question. But by saying categorically, I mean, if you like, I don't like specifically Disney's Sleeping Beauty because she's passive. Okay, but inherently saying all princesses are bad, I would look closely at that and question that.
Yeah.
He was very offended. He did not like that I was so frank because it sounded like I was accusing him specifically of being a misogynist. And then he did cut out those portions of the interview. But that is the basis of kind of what I think about it. And it didn't happen. I never set out to be like the writer of princesses.
Yeah.
But it was actually after I wrote Rapunzel's Revenge that I realized, oh, I have taken the only Grimm's Brothers fairy tales about princesses locked in towers and retold them. And that felt really problematic from like a Freudian standpoint, like, what's going on
Yeah.
there? But I was hated Rapunzel, I wrote. I hate that very song, it's horrible. But so it was not like, I wrote it to reclaim it.
Yeah.
But still, so princesses for me, it just kept coming
Yeah.
up. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't really something I set out to do. And to the point where, we, DC Comics, my husband and I, he was a lifelong comic reader. Back in the early aughts, we pitched, DC Comics and Marvel, we wanted to write, some graphic novels for young readers with their characters back then. At that point, they turned us down. They were not interested in comics for young readers. And, 15 years later.
That's changed a lot.
Yes, they asked us to write, any DC character you want. And I was like,
Wow.
Wonder Woman, of course.
Yes.
And we realized, well, she's a princess,
Yeah.
And then they were like, what else do you want to do? And we were like, Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld. Because it was this fabulous 80s character,
Yeah.
and the name is hilarious. And it was another princess. It was kind of just a mistake.
Yeah.
And then this summer we got to write Starfire, who's an alien princess. I was like, have we just done the 3 DC princesses again accidentally?
That is
Like,
so
I don't
great.
know what is happening that this
Yeah.
keeps falling into my lap. But
Well,
for me, it's
those
just writing
prin-
about girls. It's
those-
just taking a different,
Those princesses trust you.
that's,
Yeah, they want their stories to be
and they also
told.
do
Yeah,
from each other,
yeah.
which is what I glory in. I think more than like reclaiming princesses, it's more just about, I want to write about girls, and I want to do so many different kinds of girls.
Yeah.
Because I felt that kind of thing where there's 3 kinds of female characters, and there's so many male
Yeah.
characters. And I have so much to say about this, but I will say sometimes when I teach writing conferences for adults, I have become a little bit shameless. And I will ask people, men in the room, can you name 5 female writers that you've read more than one of their books? They almost never can.
Really?
And I say, women, can you name 20 male writers that you've read more than one of their books? They're like, clearly. And this is what's happening in literature. So I know a lot of men who are like really great men and have great female relationships in their lives. But because so many books limit their female characters and portray their female characters when they're writing, they tend to like draw rather from life. They tend to draw from literature, and they're writing the same female characters over and over again. And I was like, you have to read more female writers.
Yeah.
And there's such a prejudice against it at every level. When I did, one more quick story, when I did Princess in Black, you asked me about how I choose age groups.
Yeah.
That was the only book that I was very thoughtful about what age I wanted for, because when I thought of the premise, I knew I could do any age group for it. But there were multiple reasons why I wanted to do this particular one. But one of them was, as I travel around these past 20 years, I meet a lot of kids. I saw that 3rd grade was when boys decided that girls were stupid. And when they started identifying themselves as a boy, and what it means to be a boy is to not like girls, not care about girls.
Yeah.
Before then, they didn't care. Unless they were really objectively taught to. So I thought, if you could have a book that they're gonna love, it's a superhero, they fight monsters, it's hilarious, there's nothing not to love about this book. But it's about a girl, and not just any girl, it's a princess. There's no way you can deny that it's a girl. Then if they love that from ages 4, 5, 6, 7, then my evil plan that I'm so often accused of having, I never do have any like weird agenda, but I did in this case. My evil agenda was hopefully some boys would be more empathetic towards girls. That's my evil agenda.
Yeah.
I love that.
That people are really
Great
mad at me
evil
about how dare I create more empathy. But I thought if you get these boys when they're young, and then as they get older and they're like, girls are stupid, and don't read stories about girls, and they would have this memory of like, but I liked Princess in Black. So I wanted to do that, and I was advised many times, many publishers rejected it.
Wow.
And I was advised many times that if I wanted to do that, I was like, it was one of my stipulations was when a publisher went through, I was like, I don't want this marketed for girls. It's just a book for readers. Please don't say it's a girl book. And they were like, well, not Kennewick. Kennewick's great. But a lot of other people said, then you can't have it, the title be Princess in Black. Because if you have Princess in the title,
Hmm.
then boys will not read it. That's what they told me. So many people, thousands. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
And if you can't have a girl on the cover, you have to have a gender neutral cover that doesn't show a female character. I was like, no.
No.
In fact, the opposite. I mean, like, I want there to be I don't want to be sneaky about it. I want there to be no way for people to mistake that this is about a girl.
Yeah.
And they're still gonna love it. And you
Yeah.
know what, 10 years later they do.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
hear from parents of boys all the time.
Yes.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And this book did not change fundamentally who these boys were. It just opens them up to
Yeah.
be more empathetic with the world. Don't we want, and it's for the girls' sake too, don't
Yeah.
we want a world full of people who actually think that girls are worthy of having their own stories and capable of having an interior life and that they matter? I mean, that's good for girls as well as boys.
That is so beautifully said.
Wait, and on that topic, can we also talk about the Prince in Pink?
Yes.
And where he
were you
came from?
surprised about that Summer? I was shocked.
Oh,
I feel that same way about everything I've read. about
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
it's just, this one may make me cry.
Oh.
This is hard. So, where that came from is, from the very beginning, 10 years ago, when we started traveling around, we traveled we've been to like probably 40 different states. I've done assemblies about the Princess in Black.
Yeah.
And every time I mention Princess in Black, a kid will say, is there gonna be a Prince in Pink? Because the kids get the joke.
Yeah.
We don't normally see a princess in black. We don't
Yeah.
normally see a prince in pink. They get the play on that. It is not about sexual orientation or
Yeah.
gender for them. It's just about kids wearing whatever color they want.
Yeah.
And is that transgressive in some way? And so we always said, yes, we're gonna do a Prince in Pink someday. Back then, we didn't think there'd be any problem.
Yeah.
Like at the time, it felt like it's just a natural extension.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's very important for me with Princess in Black is that like sometimes when they have like rough and tumble princesses, they hate being a princess and they hate dresses and they hate femininity.
Yeah.
They kind of hate themselves is what the message is saying. It was very important to me that Princess Magnolia loves being a
Yeah.
princess. She loves wearing glass slippers and having tea parties.
Yeah.
And she also loves putting on her boots and her cape and fighting monsters and she doesn't have to choose.
Yeah.
So we always thought we want to have this little boy who loves being a knight and putting on a shining armor and battling in the bookie battles, this very grumpy canoe.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
very silly. And then when there's a party emergency, he loves putting on his pink and his tassels and helping decorate for a party and making things beautiful. And he likes to be both. Then once these books, they take years to get illustrated and, the process is very long. So we'd already finished our part of it when the tone of the world started to change. And I thought, okay, this is going to be the one. And I even told Wynn, and she's like,
really?
no, it's not. Why would anybody care? It's exactly the same thing. You don't expect a princess to wear black or a princess to wear pink. I was like, but no, it's the hierarchy.
Yeah.
It's okay. And it's commendable for a girl to reach up, but for a boy to reach down, of course, in reality, they're side by side. The hierarchy is a lie.
Yeah.
But the way people see it is it's a boy reaching down. He's demeaning himself by leaning into any feminine aspect of himself.
Yeah.
But the part of it that has hurt so much is just that there are real little boys out there.
Yeah.
This is not a fictional character. And so the hatred that people are spewing, and it comes at me personally. I'm accused of being a pedophile and a groomer, which I don't understand. Like, I feel like that should be, I'm not a litigious person, but saying that about somebody should be libel or slander, because that's not true, and there's absolutely no evidence of it, and that affects my ability to work and be a human being. It's a horrible accusation, and it also lessens the meaning of those words, which are real words, and there are real people who do those things, and it's horrific. And so please stop accusing people like willy-nilly with those words, because you're creating problems in so many different ways, including what you care about. But apart from just painful coming at me personally, which it is, but I'm okay. It's just the real little boys out there who see that happening, and the real little boys who like to wear pink
Yeah.
and to decorate for a party. Or whatever it is that we have deemed as being traditionally feminine. We're saying they're wrong. We're saying you shouldn't, a story about you shouldn't exist, and that also means in a very real way that you should not exist.
Yeah.
And if you were my son, I would reject you, and I don't want my kids to empathize with you. I don't want them to see you as someone who's deserving of a story, which means someone who's fully human, someone who deserves empathy, someone who deserves to walk on this earth. That is heartbreaking for me. And the ugliness of it and the cruelty of it keeps me up at night. So I don't know what I can do more than just keep telling the stories.
Yeah.
But the people who are really on the front line, because I don't have a public email address and I don't read comment sections, and I just live with my sweet family.
Yeah, good for you.
But the
done.
people,
Yeah.
I'm not on the front lines, the people who are the librarians and the teachers,
Yeah.
and they're getting the brunt, and the booksellers, and they're getting the brunt of it. And it's terrible what they're going through. And I'm just like, support your local teacher, librarian, bookseller today, because it's not fair that just by doing their jobs, which is objectively really great,
Yeah.
positive, amazing jobs,
Yeah.
that they're getting these horrible accusations and threats.
Yeah. I was so shocked this summer reading all the backlash. So it's a beautiful book and good for you for standing up, but I felt for you. I didn't even know you. I felt for you very much this summer.
Yeah, don't worry about me though. I mean,
Oh.
I get emotional, but I'm okay.
Mhm.
It's the real little kids
Truly.
that I feel for.
Truly. Yeah.
Hear it happening around them and be like, I can't be myself.
Yeah.
Or that the kids hear their parents talk that way and
Yeah.
therefore gives them permission
To,
to bully other kids, or even worse, as we've seen even in our own state recently.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
horrible stuff.
yeah.
Life and
absolutely.
death. I'm not overstating this.
No.
We gotta stop assigning certain gender expressions as being something that makes somebody, less than human.
Yeah.
Anything that we say in our world history as humans, any category we put people into that we say you're not quite fully human, that's when genocides happen. And
Yeah.
we just,
Yeah.
draw the
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
Everybody's human.
Yeah.
You're so right.
Yep. We could have a whole hour about
This
this.
This might be 5 hours.
I know, and I want to bring in like history
Yeah.
and research and all of
Yeah.
the things that I'm talking anecdotally, but there's so much we could say about this, and I hope we just lead with love and compassion.
Yeah, I agree. It can be really discouraging, and I work with future English teachers and my heart goes out to them. Can be a brutal place to fight parents and to still stand up for what you believe in and what kids should be reading. And anyway, so good for you. I really applaud what you did this summer and how you stood up for yourself in the book and for all those kids that like the book, enjoyed the book. It's an entirely beautiful series. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Speaking of love, and to kind of shift to a happier topic, do you have any favorite characters from the books that you have written, or any characters that really have stayed with you?
So many. I mean, I
that's-
mentioned Squirrel Girl.
I do love this question.
But I remember used to getting this question. I would always say Razzo from my Books of Bayard series,
Yeah.
because he was not on the original outline for Goose Girl, but he just popped up as like such a character. And then he was gonna be a very minor part in a birding, and then he just came in a big way. And then he got his own book, which he never was going to. And then in the fourth book was about his sister, and even then in the original outline, he wasn't gonna be in most of the book.
Yeah.
And he got in there anyway, and I realized I love this kid. I
Yeah.
love this boy. I love thinking through his vision. He's so different from me, and I just would love to go to a buffet with him.
Yeah.
And he would just enjoy every aspect of
He would
the
be thrilled.
food. He loves to eat, and I just would love to eat a dinner with him. So yeah, I think about him. I mean, honestly, it's a little bit discouraging that I don't really get to meet any of my characters.
Aw,
It's like,
yeah.
not fair, because I really love them. So writing is like one, you asked for some favorite aspects of it. It's actually just like spending time with these friends.
Yeah.
Who I really love. I genuinely love people.
Yeah.
And that makes it easier to write a lot of characters. But I know that sounds a little crazy that like you get to spend time with these people who you've like made up
It's
and
delightful. No.
in your head.
Perfect.
Yeah.
sense.
I
I did too.
remember one time, so one of my books was turned into a movie, and when we went to England to film it, and the actor J.J. Field played a character that I wrote named Mr. Nobley.
Yes.
And we were on the English estate where we were filming, and I had met him the other day, on a previous day. So I'd already met him, but I was sitting on my little camp chair, and he was in his full Mr.
Yeah.
Darcy outfit.
Yeah.
And he was walking in the distance, and I was watching him because I was like, really looks exactly the way I imagined. And then right then,
Aw.
he turns and he sees me looking at him, and he smiles and waves. And I swear, I was not sitting on the earth anymore. I was like falling through space, like I had an existential crisis. Because my character just looked at me and acknowledged me. I was like, what is real? Like my whole system just like went haywire. It was such a funny moment.
That's so cool.
But I kind of like, he's not Mr. Noble.
Yeah.
He's a lovely human being. But if we had 5 more hours, I'd tell you so many stories about the movie.
I bet.
I made an idiot out of myself, like every time I talked to him. There was like no good scenario, like I clearly was getting so flustered. Every time I was around him, but he's a lovely human being.
Oh, that's
I'm
perfect.
sorry, JJ.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're watching this right now.
Cannot wait for his comments. I just have to just quickly say, Austin Land is one of the most delightful reads. It
Oh,
just is
good.
it fills you with like such heart. And it was one of my, you have these moments where you read a book and you're like, I actually remember like how I felt when I read that. Austin Land is like one for me. Like all my Regency romances coming true in Shannon Hale's book. It just is a
Yay.
delightful story.
Oh, thank
So
you.
thank you. Like, when you talk about comedy, I mean, it's funny. It's so funny. So it's so
funny.
funny.
Oh, good.
And the movie adaptation was just,
Yeah.
did you write the screenplay?
Yeah, I co-wrote it with Drew Shahas, the director.
Oh, that's so
incredible.
cool.
Yeah, it was a
Oh.
great experience to write with her. And
It
I
was-
love collaborating. I've collaborated a lot. I do enjoy that because I'm an extroverted writer.
Yeah.
Who likes people.
Yeah.
So like I do enjoy being alone and I enjoy that process. It's very meditative, but I also enjoy the collaboration.
Okay. How is it when you collaborate with your husband?
Yeah, I've collaborated a lot with him.
Yes, you have.
So yeah, we've written.
Is like all your dinner table conversations that, or do you keep it
um,
separate? What?
We don't really keep it that separate, but it's not also only things we talk
Okay.
about, but, we just came about naturally because he's a good reader and I always like to give him my manuscripts. He was like an in-house editor.
Uh-huh.
So some like my first feedback would be from him. And then when I decided I wanted to do a graphic novel, because I was reading so many kids, I was meeting kids who were just like,
Yeah.
300-page novel is just not right for them. They think they're not readers because they don't like this.
Right.
But this just isn't right for them and the way
Right.
their brain works. And there just were no, like comic book companies that stopped making all ages comics. And there were no graphic novels for young readers in bookstores. And there were some in libraries that were manga.
Yeah.
That really opened the door.
Yeah.
But my husband, as a lifelong comic reader, I was like, we should do this. And so I wanted to do it with him because I really respected the medium and I was not an
Mhm.
expert in it. So I wanted
Mhm.
someone who'd been thinking that way for years.
Well, that's interesting.
So it was really hard when he was working full time. And so we did 2 books together. We decided we can't do this again until, and unless there's a day when we can live off the books and we do it full time. And then we started doing that with, Princess in Black and then, Ever After High.
Uh-huh.
And what else have we done? Oh, the Squirrel Girl novels and the DC graphic novels. So yeah, and we're doing some more stuff right now. We're doing a lot of different kinds of stuff. I'm like usually the head honcho, the head writer.
Yeah.
And we brainstorm together and then we outline together and then we split up chapters to write first draft
Oh.
and then I'm the reviser.
Oh, that's really
So-
interesting. That's really great. Well, I love all your collaborations and
Oh,
Calamity Jack and Rapunzel are 2 of my kids. I think.
Oh, the truth about collaboration is that it doesn't save time. It doesn't save work. It
Okay.
actually is harder and takes longer.
Yeah.
But the point to do it is if, I think there's only 2 reasons to do it. If you get something out of it that you wouldn't have gotten
Mhm.
alone, and if it's fun to do.
Yeah.
So as soon as a collaboration it becomes not fun for either person anymore, I'm like, well, it's not worth it. I can write a book on my own.
Yeah. That's
But I've
interesting.
kept it with my husband, so it's worked out.
I'm impressed.
Oh, I'm looking over our list of questions and I think we've done a good job. Is
Yeah.
there anything that you feel like you need to tell us that you haven't talked about yet?
No, I have no needs.
Okay. I have 2 questions for you, Shannon.
Yes.
One, I probably have 12, but I'll just stick with like 2. So with this being the American, the Mormon Letters Association, we'd love to hear just how faith now and in the past has influenced your work? I know you definitely mentioned it in the graphic novels you have, but did it ever inform your work before then? And does it inform your work now where you are on your faith journey, or is it something you don't really consider being a part of your writing anymore?
Yeah, well, so growing up in the church,
Yeah.
it was completely integrated into me and every part of me. So I never really thought about it as a separate thing.
Oh,
But I remember when I was first working on The Goose Girl, which is my first novel, I felt so much guilt that I was not writing like, I don't know, a retelling of Abish or something. Because I felt like there were these, like, I can't remember now, there were so many quotes about, someday we'll have our own,
Milton's and
Milton's
Shakespeare's
of
of our
our
own.
own, yeah.
good job, Emma.
Women, yeah. And also like everything we do should be proclaiming the gospel and all of that. And I just, deep in my soul, writing a book is so hard. There was no part of me that wanted to write about the Mormon experience.
Yeah.
Or Mormon scripture or anything like that. I wanted to go far away on this fantasy, but I felt so guilty about it. I felt really ashamed of myself that I wasn't like being a better missionary. So I remember thinking, I will put the fact that I was a missionary in my bio.
Oh,
So maybe the fact that will lead people to look at the church and then I could be a missionary that way. And then that was me giving myself permission to write whatever I wanted without that kind of heavy kind of, what's the word where you're told that you have to dictate the proclamation? I can't think of the word I'm trying to think. Anyway, that the burden of that. So I really just, even looking at now, I'm such a different person than I was back then. Somehow I stand up with every sentence I wrote in Goose Girl, every sentence I wrote in Anna Burning. I really feel like, even though my beliefs now are so different than they were then, that when I write, I really feel like it's a meditative process for me, and I'm writing in connection with my higher self, and I'm not thinking about what's out here. And I feel like it's been a real gift for me that I've been able to kind of turn that off as I work. I wrote a book called Actor and the Housewife, which is a book for adults. It came out maybe about 2010. And it's about this Utah Mormon housewife who writes a screenplay and becomes best friends with a British actor. And it's not really wish fulfillment. I can't really say what it is. It's an odd little book, but I loved it. I poured my heart into it.
I enjoyed it as well.
Oh, thank you.
I did.
It did not so well. And I got
Sorry.
so much hatred for that book.
Oh,
Oh my gosh.
shoot.
I got so many. I used to have a public email address, and I got two very different kinds of, the responses I got from people who were mad at me really split down the middle in terms of gender. So from women, I got, how dare you? You've sold out to the world. I used to be able to trust you, but I can't anymore. You've done this for money and fame, and someday you'll pay the price.
Oh, gosh.
And from men, I got, you didn't realize what you were doing, but let me correct you that you actually are causing harm.
Oh.
So the women gave me the benefit of the doubt that I did something on purpose, even though it was evil. But the men became my priesthood leader and assumed I didn't know what I was doing. And
correct you.
they needed to correct me.
Right.
And
Which
so
helps us worse.
it was,
Yeah.
sold out to the world. I've gotten that so many times. But I saw an interesting thing from readers was that for every single book that I published up until I stopped having a public email address.
Yeah.
I would get emails saying, thank you. I always can trust you. This book is someone I can give to my daughter and my grandmother, and I feel safe with you.
Yeah.
And the same book, I would get emails, how dare you? I used to be able to
so
trust you.
interesting.
This is destructive to the youth. I wouldn't be able to share this with anyone. And it made me realize I cannot wait. And then also the same kind of reaction for Acting the Housewife, where I got people saying, who are Mormon, who are saying, this character is completely unrealistic. She's way too liberal. She does not represent Utah Mormons. And I also got, this character is really unrealistic. She's way too conservative. She doesn't represent Utah
Oh,
Mormons.
wow.
So what I got was that we think we're a monolith in this, especially in Utah, but in the Mormon community, we think we're all kind of think the same and have the same experience, but we do not. And we're very different. And also I realized we don't like scrutiny.
Yeah.
Like, so I finally wrote this book that actually, was about a member of the church, and I thought it had I had nuance. There were many members of the church and they were different from each other. And And I thought there were some tender moments and even some spiritual moments. And Mormons did not like it. And Mormons don't want to be represented.
Interesting.
And I've had, especially from men, I've had so much pushback. Men didn't read that book, of course. But from my Real Friends series, I got pretty attacked by that from Mormon men. They prefer Brandon Sanderson. They prefer Mormons who manifest their faith through metaphor and fantasy. Do not want realism. And so,
In your Real Friends series?
yes, yeah.
This just blows my mind.
So, yeah, it's been a very weird, I will say, outside of Utah, I always have people in BYU sweatshirts, come to my signings,
Yeah.
whatever state I'm in.
Yeah.
And I do feel like, oh, they're proud of me and they're proud that I'm part of their community. And I love that. I say at home, there's some real suspicion in Utah, yeah. So it's a kind of fascinating thing to look through the lens of all the experiences I've had, the feedback I've had as being sort of a public facing LDS person.
Yeah.
As sort of kind of getting a read on our culture. And I say that we're way more diverse than we think.
Yeah.
And there's way more variety than people are giving credit for. But in terms of where I am, I'm not the same person who felt bad about not preaching the gospel with the church anymore.
Good.
So I'm not in the church anymore. I've stepped out of it entirely. It is who I was for many, many years. For 45 years, I was active in every way and attending in every way. But it's not where I am now. And so actually, when I got the word, I was like, I'm not sure. I need to let them know. They were like, oh, it has nothing to do with,
No.
because, but I still do feel like I'm a Mormon.
Yeah.
Because I was born and raised in it. I feel like it's in my DNA. It's in my whole experience. It is strange. It's a different place now. I had kind of like a kind of dream epiphany the other day that I was like, oh, I'm a mermaid. I was like, maybe I need a mermaid tattoo because that's a post-Mormon thing to get a tattoo. Which I have not done. Or I've never had alcohol or, I'm basically still Mormon. But mermaid is like, because I'm between two worlds, and I think I always have been.
Yeah.
Living in Utah, but being in a very progressive industry.
Yeah.
And living here, but traveling all over, having friends from many different areas. I've always kind of moved between two worlds, but also never really felt like I belonged in either one. Because I think that progressive people are suspicious of me because I'm a Utah Mormon.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that Mormons are suspicious of me because
you're progressive.
I'm a mouthy broad out in the world writing about Princess in Pink. I don't know. The great sin of that. But so it is an interesting time for me. I have never felt better in my life. I write about anxiety disorder and OCD, which are gone and have been for about 9 months now. I have no more symptoms.
Amazing.
At all,
Yeah, good for you.
which is, I didn't know that was possible.
Yeah.
And I think the cognitive dissonance of feeling like having to stand up for something and portray something that didn't feel right in my heart all the way, that really kind of pulls at a person.
Yeah.
So I think you can see that tension in my writing throughout, is like feeling like an outsider, feeling the tension of being pulled between two worlds. I think you can see that in a lot of my books. But I don't think I've written anything that I'm not ashamed of anything I've written.
Yeah.
And I feel like somehow or other, I can stand by everything I've done. I had this kind of epiphany recently of like, just because I was a different person when I wrote Goose Girl doesn't mean it doesn't have value anymore.
Oh, yeah.
And the person I was when I wrote Goose Girl, just because I believe differently than I do now, doesn't mean that she didn't have value either.
Yeah.
And everybody is where they need to be. And this kind of like beautiful, total acceptance and love for everybody exactly where they are is so great. So I'm just like over here living in love and compassion and
It's beautiful.
yeah, it is possible to live in joy even when there's hardship. And I didn't ever really know that before, and I do.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really sweet. And very Well, it's very lovely to hear your explanation. So, I'm curious really that quickly, who you admire in the publishing world author-wise? Like, who do you always look forward to having
Oh, gosh.
a chance to read?
Oh, this is always such a tricky
I
question.
know,
'cause I
I'm
have so
sorry.
many
I know you
friends.
probably have tons.
Like, who would who could I leave out? I don't think one of the greatest thing about this profession is getting to know so many writers. And there are so many writers that I've published in a lot of different areas, but I have to say, people who write for children are like the greatest people on earth. Like, I love
Yeah.
children's writers, but I love everybody in children's
Yeah.
publishing. I mean, truly, like, everybody who works in children's publishing. And, you know, librarians and children's librarians and elementary school teachers and booksellers and publishers and everybody. It's like such a great place. Like, because of everything going on in the world, I think there's this misconception of people with an agenda trying to corrupt or change and stuff like that. But really what it is mostly former kids who felt scared and alone and broken and unlovable, wanting to create and promote books that celebrate every kind of kid, so that every kid can feel celebrated and worthy and loved.
Yeah.
And that's actually the agenda.
Yeah.
It's not wanting to change anybody into anything they're not. It's just celebrating who they are. And because stories for so long really focused on one particular kind of kid or a very small group, the opening up of having a lot of different kinds of kids feels like it's taking over the world. But actually, there's still all those other books that are out, and still all those books are still being written. It's just there's more variety than there used to be.
Yeah.
But it has not changed anything else. So, yes, love, compassion.
And then I think this may be a last
Yeah, let's
question.
do it. Yeah.
Can you give us a sneak peek to anything you're currently working on that we can look forward to?
Yes.
I'm always working on like 8 things.
I know, it sounded like that.
That's
for me.
so
Yes,
impressive.
yes.
No, it is kind of, I was always working on 2 things, because if I wrote something and I finished a draft and I sent it to my editor, sometimes the editor takes 6 months to respond. I can't just waste that, so I'm working on something else. But then what if I finish that before I hear back on that, then I gotta finish something else, and it just kind of goes like that. And then I just have so many ideas and things I want to do. So I have an ongoing chapter book series with Princess of Black. The new one comes out in September. I've got an ongoing picture book series, Itty Bitty Kitty Corn.
Yeah.
And
Darling.
oh, she's so fun. Those are just love letters between 2 best friends.
Yeah.
They're just joy, joy, joy. Also banned.
Oh,
That one blows my mind. Like,
I didn't know that.
I did not anticipate that, like, people were, like, one of the criticisms of it was even that one of the characters goes by they them pronouns, which nobody does. It's she and he. Nobody goes by they. The only they in there is referring to multiple characters. Not that there would be anything wrong with they them pronouns, but it was just like somehow that just got put on someone's list and they decided it was evil. And yeah, I mean, it's been banned in whole districts. Yeah.
Gosh, that worries me.
And also for being secret trans agenda, which it's not, but if it were, that would be okay. But also it was not written with that intention. But if a transgender kid finds that affirming, that's awesome. But that's no, like, oh my gosh. Anyway, then I've got more DC graphic novels that we're doing. Oh, this is kind of fun. We're doing a graphic novel of Princess Academy, which is something I want to do forever. And I've been working on this script for ages, and it's taking me longer to write the graphic novel script than to do the original novel. So,
has it really?
yeah, and I really thought about it from the ground up. If this was not a novel and I was writing it as a graphic novel, what would I do? And so it is a little bit different, but it has the same heart.
Oh, that's really
And
cool.
I've got another Austin Land that I've written, and
I know.
is in revisions when I can get back to it, and another middle grade fantasy, which is
For
in
a new
revisions.
series?
Yeah,
New-
brand
so
new.
Brand new, wow. Oh my gosh, Shannon, you are so busy.
I know, and I'm forgetting, sure I'm forgetting a few other things. Because there is a lot. Oh, I've got this wonderful chapter book series that I've been working on for ages. My twins are 13 and I started it when they were 6.
Oh.
And it's just from the point of view of a 6-year-old, because I love 6-year-olds and they're such
Yeah.
an interesting transition age. And I love writing about Long Go Far Away and like Pictures of Black and Fighting Monsters, but I also just want to like honor what it feels like to be 6.
Yeah.
And the ridiculousness of it and the just funny and sad and everything. Like, it's really like a love letter to Beverly Cleary.
Oh,
But anyway, many things, because I can't stop. But so many stories I want to tell. And I hope I get to just keep doing it forever.
oh my gosh. I'm
Amazing.
beyond impressed. Yes.
Please do. We need
Yes,
this
we need
forever.
all your stories, all your stories.
Okay, well, I think that's all for us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon,
So much for your
Thank
career.
you.
For
Yes,
your time.
we're so excited about this award for you.
Well,
Beyond
thank
well
you.
deserved.
It does feel weird to get kind of a lifetime achievement award. And I don't feel that old, but I did just turn 50, so maybe I'm entering my elder era and now it's time to do retrospectives.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
you.